everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Sustainability for Small Businesses, Overcoming Barriers. Thank you very much for joining us today. I'm happy to have with us Helen Wright of Imperial College and Robin Kimber of Cafedirect. Now to begin, there are a few technical instructions for this webinar. After today's presentation, there will be time to address any questions that you might have. To this, you can submit a question by typing into the Q&A box on the bottom right-hand side of your screen and then pressing send. If you have any problems with the technology or audio during the presentation, please use the chat box on the right-hand side to send me a message. Select from the drop-down send a message, and then I'll get back to you. Now out of the way, I'll now hand it over to Helen.
Hello, hope you can see slides there. I'm going to talk about small business sustainability, overcoming the barriers. A quick overview, I'm going to look at the Go Green Plus project, which happened in southwest London, and some case study examples from that project, as well as the recession as a possible barrier to business sustainability, and then how these barriers can be overcome. And this chart here shows the percentage of businesses in the UK. As you can see, 99% of businesses have under 250 employees, which means they are small and medium-sized enterprises. And this issue is quite important because it's been estimated small businesses make up about 70% of industrial pollution and account for 20% of total UK greenhouse gas emissions. And these figures are broadly similar for other countries, for example, and also the US. Small businesses are about 99% of businesses. But it's been estimated to have a greater saving potential due to the small size. So there are some advantages of that. So see that small businesses make up a share of employment within sectors such as construction, real estate, and also food services, which are sectors that do have an environmental impact. And these are some of the push factors and pull factors for businesses to become more sustainable. For example, policy and regulation, a driving force, but also consumer demand on the other side. But there's also some barriers which I'm going to go into. Some of the drivers for businesses are obviously rising energy prices, which is a big issue at the moment for a lot of businesses. There's also the economic benefits of more efficiency and resource efficiency, and regulatory pressure is another driver, as commercial pressure, for example, down the supply chain. On the right here, you can see the triple bottom line concept that was developed by John Elkington, which shows that some businesses are trying to integrate economic, environmental, and social sustainability. Barriers here, obviously, this is not an exhaustive list, but the recession has been quite a large barrier, in my view, due to the lack of access to capital. There's also a lack of awareness as another barrier for many businesses, as well as policy inconsistency, so lack of time and resources. A lot of businesses that are small to focus on making ends meet and day-to-day issues, and also see environmental issues as cost, which may be because they have the wrong information in a lot of cases. Green Plus project was implemented in South London by a consortium of London boroughs and also funded by the European Regional Development Fund. And it is in this support as on-site audits, calculations, monitoring and action plans for businesses. And it covered a lot of different areas, including energy, water, waste, compliance, and transport. One case study from the project, there was a business with very high energy bills that was heating large factory space using an electric heater, which they didn't realise was actually highly inefficient, was causing one of their highest expenditures in the business. Some costs in actually fixing this heating equipment without realising, and they were also unable to access any credit to replace the equipment or to insulate the building. An example of a market failure where a business is kind of trapped in a really inefficient situation. Access to credit. This is a big issue at the moment. As you may know, firms are being rejected for loans, and lenders have also become more risk averse and led to lend to small businesses in particular. So I see that the recession may be a barrier, as SMEs are more credit constrained and cash flow is at the moment. A lot of businesses that I was dealing with were actually reducing staff and having to downsize. However, there were some opportunities coming out. For example, small businesses starting up, innovating, or driving towards more efficiency. The barrier here is lack of information. Often this may actually have replaced old equipment without realising. Several businesses did this without looking for more efficient replacements. And in cases there was asymmetrical information between landlords and tenants, for example, as the tenant may be the one paying the bills, but the landlord is often changing the equipment or the lighting. And in cases there may be a need for actually regulation, for example, using rated standards for equipment. This is another case study example. There was a very environmentally aware security firm that wanted to go carbon neutral, installing solar panels throughout the building. Unfortunately, they were backed by the changes to the feed-in tariff regulation in the UK. And also, they were given the wrong information by the council, told them that they needed build regulations and also various architectural drawings, which in fact they didn't need, so they were given the wrong information about the ministry to overcome these hurdles, although it's very frustrating for them. An area can be lack of top-level support, and also staff turnover rates. Record for staff are changing a lot. For example, in food industry companies, may show the need for having kind of environmental management system in place, or certification like the ISO 14001. There can be different management styles, for example, top-down versus bottom-up approaches. Staff engagement may be needed in a lot of small businesses to deal with issues like turning off equipment. This is the business for businesses. There can be an advantage to having incremental changes and manageable steps for business. For example, a lot of quick ones, which we can see, are installing lighting, installations, things like plug timers, and will make equipment go off automatically when not needed. This may help the business to move into sustainability and then to do more longer-term measures that may require more effort or time. And I'm just going to focus on lighting briefly. PIR sensors are obviously very useful in areas particularly where the lighting does not need to be on all the time and the savings are very high compared to the costs. This campaign can be really effective as well, with minimal effort or cost. And LED lighting, you can see here this that can be generated from changing 50 halogen bulbs, and this is a sort of typical small shop or office, including installation costs. So in this case, there's an 86% saving. And this is using some of the spreadsheets we were using. And the same occurs for tube lamps, fluorescent tubes. There's a 69% saving in this case from changing 50 5-foot tubes. That's an electricity bill saving of over £1,000. These are some of the examples where sustainability can impact on the business's bottom line. For example, the tangible assets of the business, equipment, but also tangible assets such as branding, reputation, and also can impact on the business's direct expenditures like energy, water, and waste. The trends and common issues that I came across, it's difficult to generalize because there's such a diversity in small businesses. By high street businesses and retail, issues like lighting and waste came up quite a lot. Where manufacturing business, there was more energy-intensive processes and often had issue of IT and lighting. Whereas in the food industry, some of the issues was waste, as well as energy and sourcing of products. Because of local sourcing has win-win advantages for having fresher foods and also just supply chains. This is a diagram from Hart and Milstead, which shows the value of sustainability, which can happen internally as well as externally, impact on the business both today and tomorrow. A useful concept is life cycle thinking. For example, SMEs working the whole way down the supply chain, they can be producers as well, which means design more sustainable products and minimize their use of raw materials. As also transport and processing businesses at the end user end, and buyers from other SMEs as well. Case study of Hotel Rafayel, which is in Battersea, and then it saved £18,000 on LED lighting. The payback time was actually less than a year. It saved 79 tonnes of CO2 and also awarded a business award. This is savings from a sample of 58 businesses where the data was available. And the average potential savings was more than £1,000 in the lighting. And this is an saving as well. And interestingly, the saving per tonne for a tonne of CO2 saved, £245 could also be saved. And this is actually a higher figure than in the McKinsey cost curve that some people may be familiar with. Quite interesting, as it may indicate businesses can actually save more than has been estimated before. And just a ballpark figure which shows if these savings were saved up, or scaled up across the UK, some of these businesses were smaller than average and other businesses were too small to take part in the programme. But as you can see here, the potential savings could be really high. And these can also be reinvested to create jobs, which demonstrates the value of some of these Green Deal initiatives that are being brought in. Usage was also for some businesses, and the greatest use of was toilet flushing and urinals, which is simple to deal with and free or extremely low cost. For example, each of these flush-saving devices has around 6,000 litres per year. Recycling is another issue here. Often the policy drivers were landfill tax, and there's a wide acceptance among staff about recycling around. Can be time and space constraints for small businesses in separating waste, as well as a lack of coordination, as a lot of small businesses are in shared premises, for example. There was also found to be a presence of unfair contracts from road waste contractors, which is something that's been in the media at the moment, and for legal reform to actually protect small businesses. Some further successes from the project were things like lighting, water, recycling. Some has found win-win situations where the lighting was more efficient, had also brought in more customers, and recycling of timber, and also making savings with recycling. Then there was high enthusiasm from most of the businesses. This is the data that was collected. Most savings were actually made in grid electricity, and more than £2,000 of savings on average per business. So emerging innovations that was seen coming out of this were things like cloud computing, paperless offices, video conferencing as well, digital marketing, and businesses engaging in the Cycle to Work scheme. Summary, these are just some of the recommendations that I've drawn up. There's a need for more regulatory supports and consistency with access to finance and loans and services. But there are also opportunities in the supply chain, for example, from larger companies and from public procurement to help smaller businesses deal with these issues. And I think the actual most major issue is communication and awareness of financial benefits. And that's something which toolkit like the one we're going to see presented can be highly effective. This is just some further reading and websites. Thanks for listening. Thank you.
All right, so that, Helena. I'm now going to go ahead and pass it over to Robin Kimber of Cafedirect. Robin?
Hi.
Should be able to hand it over.
Hello?
Hi, Robin. Yes, we can hear you just fine. Do you have I think I have the slides open for you right now.
Perfect.
So you'll be able to go through them.
Great. Hello, everyone. I'm going to tell you about a couple of projects that we have and how they're helping small businesses at both ends of our supply chain. So just first a little bit about Cafedirect. We're a smallholder tea, coffee and cocoa company, and we're also a social enterprise, so we have a mission. Our mission is to change lives and build communities through inspirational, sustainable business. We focus our social and economic impact in the developing world. So we do have a social mission. It is to be delivered through sustainable business. So again, just a bit of background on Cafedirect and how we came about. So in 1989, there was a crash in the coffee market, and this meant that all the farmers, coffee is one of those sort of weird commodities. Over 75% of coffee is actually grown by smallholder farmers. So all of these farmers who don't have huge financial security were suddenly having to get bottom prices for their coffee. And coffee, again, is one of these weird commodities where it's the second most traded commodity in the world after oil, which seems sort of crazy considering it's a food, and the majority of it is all bought through anonymous auctions, through the stock exchange, which is very unique for a food commodity. So in 1889, when these smallholder farmers were hardly getting any money for their coffee, there was three cooperatives who decided to just send over a shipping container worth of coffee each to the UK, cut out all these middlemen and see whether they could sell it direct to the consumers in the UK. So it was literally sold in church halls and charity shops and at events. And that's how Cafedirect was created. They realised that this business model for coffee was actually quite effective. You got a lot more money back to the growers by cutting out these middlemen. And 3 years later, Fair Trade mark was launched, and we were the first coffee company in the UK to carry the mark. So we are an innovative business model. By buying direct from the farmers and being a social enterprise, we reinvest our profits So though it is a for-profit company, we reinvest over 50% of our profits back to the farmers from which buy our coffee, cocoa, and tea. But we're trying to be innovative in different parts of our supply chain. That's what I'm going to tell you about. So I am going to tell you about two ends of our supply chain. We look at it from bean to cup, and I'm going to tell you about one at the bean end and one at the cup end. So first at the bean end is the Reforestation Sierra Piura project. And this came about again because of our business model, because we buy through anonymous auctions and we buy directly from the coffee farmers. We hear from them year on year what's impacting their harvest, what's impacting their quality, and we started to see this trend that climate change was really raising up the agenda for our coffee farmers, for all of our producers, actually, coffee, tea, and cocoa, and was starting to make a real impact on quality and the harvest of their products. So we did a project called AdaptCC, which was a 3 project, and it was co-funded by the German government. And it was looking into adaptation. This was the 4 things that it looked into. It looked into the issues around what was causing the problem, what was the cause of that issue, what adaptation could help overcome it, and then how you could finance that adaptation. And that's always the really difficult bit, is the finance. There's a lot of mechanisms out there to finance mitigation, but not so much for adaptation. I'll tell you about one of the 4 projects we did in AdaptCC, and that was in Peru. So this is just a quick diagram of the landscape of where we're talking about. So at 2,100 meters, you have a community called Choco, a region called Choco, which has 10 villages in. And then further down the hill, you've got Sepi Cafe, which is at about 1,100 meters. And all this diagram, it looks like they're really close. That sort of hairpin bend, 5-hour drive through quite sort of treacherous roads to get up from one to the other. So these communities didn't know each other, but they were having a huge impact on one another. So Sepi Cafe is a cooperative of 6,500 farmers, and that's from who we buy our coffee, one of the producer groups. Sound was the issue, was that the coffee farmers further down the hill were having these erratic rains. There was floods, there was landslides, and then at other times of years there was droughts. And it was looked into it. We found that the cause was firstly climate change, which was disrupting the sorry, engine just came up, which distracted me, but I'm not going to read this until later. So one of the causes was climate change, which was disrupting the weather patterns, but then the other cause was deforestation. So further up the hill in Choco, slowly over the years, these subsistence farmers had been deforesting the area simply for firewood and to build their houses. But obviously this meant that there wasn't the water catchment area to absorb these rains and let them slowly trickle down to the farmers. They were coming in these flash floods and then droughts at other times of years. So adaptation solutions that we found was 2 things. One was trying to reforest this previously deforested area, which would help the water run down the hill at a sort of more leisurely pace. And the other thing was adaptation actually on the farm, so things like mending reservoirs. And then the financing. This was the really difficult bit because, like I said, there isn't a huge amount of mechanisms out there to finance adaptation. But what we had to do was through the voluntary carbon market. So in this reforestation, do sell carbon credits for reforestation. So in this area, when setting up this project, and these are the Choco farmers, the first barrier to overcome, which was really difficult, was the nervousness from them that we were actually a mining company coming in trying to buy their land off them to mine. So that took a while to overcome and to trust. But once that had happened, then there was this, excuse me, the second barrier, which was the carbon market. The majority of the schemes out there don't let you parcel land together. And so usually what happens is an NGO will buy the land and they'll grow all the trees and then they'll own the credits. But that's what we really didn't want to do. We wanted these smallholder farmers to own the credits themselves and to own the land, because they did. It's sort of lots and lots of smallholder farmers owned the land. So after a lot of hunting, we were very lucky to find a voluntary carbon credit scheme which lets you parcel the land together, and that was called Carbon Fix. And then that this project was completely unique and completely original, because for the first time, the smallholder farmers not only own the land, but then the trees, they own the carbon credits, and they sell the carbon credits themselves, and they get the money directly. So a barrier with carbon schemes, especially in reforestation, is the financing and the pre-financing, because it's a time between someone going to do the project, doing the verification, which is a long and cumbersome and expensive process, planting the trees, growing the trees, and then you only get the money in once the trees have grown and they've sequestered the carbon. So what we did as Cafedirect was we committed to buying 55,000 carbon credits, £55,000 worth of carbon credits over 6 years. And we bought some of those carbon credits up front before the project was even verified or anything. So they had this pre-financing to get the project off the ground and to keep it going. And that was critical to getting the project, because otherwise there would have been no financing there to do the initial planting of the trees, buying the saplings, all of those things. So the project is now up and running. It's been going for 3 years, and they're reforesting this area of 244 hectares. Over the 25 years, 43,000 carbon credits will be created, and this will generate $633,000 US. But what, again, is unique in this project, and why the project was created in the first place, was we were looking for a way to finance adaptation on these coffee farms further down the hill. So we reforested this area further up the hill, and those farms, those subsistence farms, own the credits, get the money for it. But what built into the model early on is that the chocolate farmers would get 90% of the money, but 10% of the money would be used for adaptation on the farms. And that we managed to finance adaptation on the coffee farms was through the carbon market, and for this small percentage of the money to go to adaptation. So, for example, this is a picture of a dam which was mended with some of the money which surrounds 5 of the areas. The other things that the money has gone to on adaptation has been training farmers around climate change and adaptation, and planting trees on the coffee farms, so amongst the coffee trees, to try and prevent soil erosion and further sort of landslides. That is the Sierra Piura project. So what we are proud of it for is that it is unique, it is the first of its kind, and we've created this report called Coffee Climate Crisis. And the reason we really wanted to do that was because we are a relatively small company. We're not going to be able to replicate this on all of our, across the whole world. But what we hope that it will be is a blueprint for other companies to use this mechanism to finance adaptation on their farms and in areas and different countries. So if you want to know more about that project, you can read our Coffee Climate Crisis report, and we've also got a film on our website which you can see. Secondly, I'm going to tell you about our EcoToolkit. That is at the absolute other end of our supply chain. So it is where coffee is drunk is used in coffee shops and restaurants and bars. And this came about because when we did our carbon footprint, we looked at the whole supply chain, all the way from bean to cup, all the way from the producers transporting the produce from South America or Africa, the processing, storage, packaging, consumption, and then the disposal of our packaging. And so looking at this whole carbon footprint, even though a very small percentage of this is actually within our control, we really thought it was critical to look at the whole thing and not ignore any of the areas. So what we found was almost 18,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide is our whole carbon footprint of all of our products every year. But the really interesting thing we found was 74% of the carbon footprint was at the consumption end. So it's literally the boiling of the kettle right at the end. And this was particularly true. So this shows our hot spots. So all of our different roast and ground, tea, cocoa, and then both in food service and in retail. And see these two ginormous hotspots, which is in the consuming phase and it's in food service. So the carbon footprint of our products is particularly high when it's not consumed at home, but it's consumed in restaurants and cafes, and that's partly to do with the fact that espresso machines are relatively energy intensive. So what we wanted to do was, although we don't own all of these outlets to which sell our products, some of them are Cafédirect branded, but we own them. They're all independently owned, and we can't control them directly. But we felt that it wasn't a reason for us to ignore this huge percentage of our carbon footprint. So what we wanted to do was really help all of these independent, small shops in reducing their environmental impact. Although the starting point was in carbon and electricity, we wanted to help them on all aspects of their environmental impact. What we decided to do was create an EcoToolkit. It is online, it is free, anyone can use it, whether they're a Cafedirect customer or not. And try to make it as simple as possible, because as Helena was talking about earlier, it's very difficult for SMEs. They do have a large impact. There's about 14,000 coffee shops in the UK at the moment, and they're growing very, very quickly. But they're all small, and they don't have someone dedicated to sustainability who can do an in-depth study into their impacts and where their hotspots are and what the solutions are and what the ROI is and stuff. So that's why we wanted to do all that work for them, and we partnered with Trust and RAP and Woodwise, who really helped us on the different parts of this to make sure what we were telling them was right, was correct, was the critical part, which would have the biggest impact, and was credible and useful to them. But we also partnered with some sort of like-minded companies such as Kingspan, Keep Cup, Loop, Ecotricity, which would then make the transition easier. So they offer deals and discounts to the EcoToolkit users. We recommend things they can do, and then here is a deal to make that cheaper and easier for you. So the EcoToolkit works is it has 4 chapters: procurement, energy, waste, and water. And what a user will do is they'll answer a simple set of questions, yes or no, and this will give us an understanding of what type of business they are, but what they've already done. And depending on the way that they answer these questions, we then give them some tailored advice and tips on what they can do for their specific venue. And they'll do ratings, so between red, amber and green, depending on where they are on their journey under each of these chapters. And then they get very simple, very easy tips and advice on what they can do, and they're also rated on what impact that will have, so that's how many leaves is how big the environmental impact is, and then second, what the cost to them will be, because some things are obviously very low cost to implement, whereas others, for example, creating a rainwater harvesting device for your toilet might be a slightly larger investment. The toolkit hasn't been running for very long, but we're already seeing a really nice mix of users. The majority have been in shops and those sorts of things, but we're seeing all sorts of businesses, industry, pubs, restaurants all using it. So yeah, that is my two examples. Both of them are completely different, and they're both examples of how we're trying to help either smallholder farmers adapt to climate change, or small coffee shops and restaurants reduce their environmental impact. But both of them are also unique. The Piura project, as I said, we really would hope to be a blueprint for others to replicate, because it is the first time that the smallholder farmers have owned the carbon credits themselves, own the land, sell them themselves, and get the money directly. But it's also the first time that carbon credits has been used to fund adaptation. And then secondly, on the EcoToolkit, there are a lot of toolkits out there. There's a lot of advice on the internet through the Energy Saving Trust and the Carbon Trust and RAP on what you can do to reduce your impact. But this is unique in the fact that it is really built for the food service industry. It talks about things which are relevant to them. So in the toolkit, it will talk about how to run your espresso machine most efficiently. But it also tailors the advice to you to make it as quick and simple and easy to use as possible. So yes, thank you very much for listening. Here are my contact details if you have any further questions, or you can ask them now. And also I've put a couple of links to our Sierra Piura project and to our EcoToolkit if you're interested to find out more or learn about them. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Robin and Helena. So actually now we're going to go ahead and move into our Q&A session. And just as a reminder to our members, please use the Q&A box to submit a question at any point. So all right, we'll go straight into it. So we have a question here that says, a barrier I've found in Cambridgeshire engaging with SMEs is that most, or all, are not able or willing to pay for the advice. Local authority is keen, they are not able to fund the advice opportunity. How do we overcome this catch-22? Helena, if you'd like to take the lead on this one.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. And I do think there's a need for better communication, actually, to spread awareness of the benefits, especially economic benefits for businesses, because a lot seem to be unaware or think that there's a cost when actually there could be a benefit. So I think some of the ways maybe could be through trade associations, things like that. Possibly the Green initiative as well that's coming forward. But yeah, there's definitely a need for more funding as well where it's not economic.
Okay, thank you. And then for our next question, how can make energy saving a top priority, seeing as it takes a back seat for many small businesses? So one of you can take the lead on this one.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, I'd say we always need to make energy saving the top priority. As Helena showed in her slides, all businesses, energy is always the first thing which needs to be done on environmental impact. For food service industry, a lot of it is around food waste. That's actually will make a bigger environmental impact. And say for a spa, water savings is actually can be more critical. But obviously, usually on energy, that is where ROI is. That's the big expenditure for a lot of small businesses after wages, and you can see the benefits a lot easier because you see your bills changing. So I think it is a good place to start in winning the battle and winning the argument that there is savings to be made. But things just have to be made simple and easy, because we found with this EcoToolkit that even though we've tried to make it as simple and easy as possible, shops are they're still run off their feet. They love the idea of using it. They love it when they look through it, but then it's the implementation phase which is always the really difficult part. They look through it and think, oh, that's a good idea, and write down a list of things, and then you come back to them a few weeks, months later, and they're like, oh, yes, I meant to do that, but then my fridge broke, and then I had a plumbing problem. And so they're just, small businesses are constantly just firefighting and running off their feet. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges, is trying to make it as easy, simple as possible, and bite-sized chunks for them.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, I was going to ask Helena if you had anything to add.
Yeah, I'd also like to add that I think businesses aren't really aware of how much energy savings can really impact on the bottom line. I mean, for example, in one study, it found that the amount that could be saved through energy saving, actually, the business would have had to actually make 10 times that amount in sales in order to get that amount of profit. And that's something a lot of businesses might not realise, actually.
Thank you for that. Our next question, I see, is directed at Robin. And have you seen many outcomes from your EcoToolkit or gotten feedback? I'm assuming I know you said that it was launched fairly recently, but what kind, I suppose it means what kind of info have gotten back from those that have used it?
Well, we ran 2 pilot phases. So when we first created it, we did a pilot before it was launched. We got a whole range of different users, which ranged in their size and what sort of venue they were. So we had a leisure centre and a cafe and a university, all used it and gave us feedback, and that we implemented into the EcoToolkit to make final changes. But yeah, the feedback is useful and it's unique, and it gives bite-sized pieces, but it is, like I said, it's this implementation phase which really will make or break and determine whether it has an impact or not. We're now running a second pilot phase where we've got another 4 or 5 venues, one of which is actually a football stadium, which will be really interesting to hear their feedback. They're currently using EcoToolkit for a few months and then going to give us feedback. So I haven't got that second round of feedback yet, but so the feedback has been very positive. But like I say, the will be in the implementation phase, which is yet to be decided.
Okay, so that, Robin. So I think we're actually getting a bit closer to the time frame. So I'm going to end with this question here, which actually is fairly appropriate. So this is for either one of you. I guess maybe Helena and then Robin, if we want to go in order. What are small but top fixes for saving energy or reducing footprints, in your opinions and your experience?
Sorry, repeat the question.
Right. It's just asking small but like fixes, like some top fixes or small kind of things that small businesses can do for saving energy or reducing footprint. Just their opinion from what you've seen.
I would say, yeah. You want to go first?
Yeah. No, go first.
I would say some of the major, really simple things are the Piura sensors, which are just a few pounds, and that will make hundreds of pounds of savings. And so plug timers as well. a lot of businesses that I came across just had equipment on which they had sort of forgotten about. They didn't realise they didn't need that on overnight. And especially sometimes businesses have all their lights on overnight as well. That can really make a massive impact. So I think getting a hold of the bills and just looking at them, also just really obvious, simple things, some of the quick wins that businesses can make, I think.
Yeah, I'd sort of second that. I mean, in my previous role, I worked at sort of a group level for a company, and we were working with all the different companies on reducing environmental impacts. And one thing which we did was exactly what Helena was describing, was just did a walk around in the offices to try and find, just physically look at, if you can physically, using energy and what on, how often was it on, did it need to be all of that time? And we found some amazing things. My favourite example was and it's the sort of thing which you'd never find out unless you asked and if you looked, and we sort of walked into each department and said, you know, is there any stuff on here we could turn off? And so, well, that printer in the corner, why don't we turn that off? And we said, well, what is it printing? And they said, well, every day it just prints out paper with code on. Nobody knows what it's for or why it's printing it, but every day we fill it up with new paper and it prints out codes, and then we put that in the recycling bin. It was this ridiculous scenario. So we turned it off. No one complained that this code was not being printed out, and suddenly we saved a huge amount of money on, well, not a small amount of energy, but a huge amount on paper. This machine was just throwing it out, and that's the sort of thing no one would have ever known if they hadn't been asked. I, walking in that room, would have assumed that it was doing something useful, but evidently not.
Yeah, I've thought of another example as well. In a food service industry, often some businesses will have the heating equipment that's cooking right next to the freezers in the cold room. Really, really simple thing is just being a curtain to insulate between the things, because the equipment's going to be working to cool down a lot less efficiently, and I came across that several times, and that was a really, really simple thing that you could do.
It takes kind of going through your business and being able to see what there is, what there isn't. So, but I guess with that, I'm going to go ahead and close for the day. So then, I'd like to thank all of our attendees for participating today, for questions, comments, ideas. Some really good questions out there. And a big thanks to Helena and Robin for their great presentations. The wording and the relevant info will be posted shortly on the 2 Degrees site, so for all the attendees out there, keep an eye out for that. And with that, many thanks and have a great day, everyone.
Thanks much. Bye.
Thank you.